Hello and welcome to our channel. Today we will show you the 2018 anime show Golden Kamuy. It promises to be exciting, so take a seat back, unwind, and yes, there are spoilers ahead. The anime begins with a Japanese veteran named Suichi Sugimoto fighting in the Russo-Japanese War against Russian soldiers. He proclaims himself Immortal Sugimoto after fighting and heroically knocking down soldiers after soldiers. After the war, Sugimoto goes panning for gold in a river in Hokkaido. Goto, a drunken old man sitting on the coast, notices him and strikes up a conversation with him. He tells him about Naparebo, a man who murdered a group of Ainu and stole a large amount of gold before being apprehended by police. He tattooed a map over 24 escaped prisoners to indicate the location of the gold only to his comrades. Sugimoto doubts his tall tale and recalls his late friend Taraji, to whom he promised to care for his blind wife and a kid. Just then, Goto, now sober, arrives with a weapon since he has drunkenly exposed something he shouldn't have, but Sugimoto threatens him to flee. Sugimoto is now convinced of the story and goes in pursuit of Goto, only to find him dead with his gut hollowed out. He assumes it is the work of a bear, and it is only then that he sees what would lead him on a treacherous journey: Goto's body covered with deciphering tattoos. Almost immediately, he is faced with a bear, and Ashilipa, an Ainu girl, appears on time and saves him. Ashilipa checks the dead bear and determines, based on her survival instincts and skills, that the bear did not kill Goto. She suspects Kamuy, an evil winter bear, is to blame and asks that Sugimoto dispose of Goto's body. He resists, and is forced to tell her the truth about the tattoos. Ashilipa reveals that Naparebo also killed her father, so she resolves to help Sugimoto in battling the Kamuy who would come after the body. Kamuy arrives too soon, and after a long struggle, Sugimoto defeats him with the help of Ashilipa and Ratar, a Hokkaido wolf and the last of its species. After that, the two shake hands to discover the gold, with Sugimoto to support Taraji's family and Ashilipa to exact revenge. The next day, Ashilipa sets traps for the squirrels to eat them. After having supper in the traditional Ainu style, the two travel to the nearby city of Otaru in search of tattooed prisoners. However, they do not get any information and return to their place, pursued by one of the prisoners who gets trapped in one of their traps. While Ashilipa is drawing his tattoos, he confesses that someone is killing the prisoners, and suddenly, he is shot dead from a distance. The shooter reveals himself to be Hayakuna Sokogata, a soldier in the 7th Division of the Japanese Army. Sugimoto fights with him, driving him to fall into the cold river. He is later found by the 7th, barely alive and mumbling, "Immortal Sugimoto." Subsequently, the duo captures another prisoner, Suichi Sugimoto, who is an escape artist. While they are distracted by a rabbit, he cuts his chains and flees. Sugimoto chases him down as the weather goes terribly wrong and the two fall into a river. Faced with serious hypothermia, the two decide to cooperate to start a fire. After coming to his senses, Suichi informs him that the commander of the prisoners is Hijikata Tashai's, a former Shinsengumi captain and samurai. After revealing this, Sugimoto lets him leave, as promised. The next day, Sugimoto and Ashilipa are followed by soldiers from the 7th Division, so they decide to split up. However, Ashilipa's false footsteps are detected by the private Genjur Tanigaki, who captures her with the hand-drawn maps. Just then, Ratar appears and attacks him, but Ashilipa orders that he be left alive. Sugimoto, on the other hand, is challenged by other officers at gunpoint and evades them by entering a bear cave. The bear is awakened from a slumber by the officers' gunfire, and it attacks and kills them before dying of its wounds. Sugimoto takes the bear cub with him, and Ashilipa brings him to her village, where the cubs are cared for before being sacrificed to their deity. Sugimoto meets with Ashilipa's grandma, who wishes for him to marry Ashilipa, but he cannot understand owing to the language barrier. In terrible weather, Lieutenant Takushiro Tsurumi, the 7th's commander with an injured forehead, begins a hunt for the missing officers. Meanwhile, Hijikata confronts one of the tattooed prisoners, Ashiyama Tatsuma, in an Otaru brothel. Hijikata wants him to shake hands with him to retrieve the tattooed skins and warns him about the 7th. After spending some time in the village, Sugimoto decides to embark on the mission alone for Ashilipa's safety and travels to Otaru, where he learns of Ashiyama's violence against a brothel girl. He goes to meet with the brothel's madam, who tips Tsurumi off. He kidnaps Sugimoto and demands that he hand over the maps and help him, but he refuses. So, he decides to kill him. On the other hand, Ashilipa is upset at Sugimoto for his unannounced departure and suspects him of being in danger. She and Ritar attempt to locate Sugimoto and are met by Shiraishi, who informs them of Sugimoto's location. Meanwhile, twin brothers Yohei and Kohei Hokkaido are torturing Sugimoto, locked in a cell. Outside, Ashilipa recruits Shiraishi to bring him out in return for half the gold they would get. Shiraishi infiltrates the cell and frees Sugimoto, allowing him to murder Yohei. Sugimoto then impersonates a fatal injury using Yohei's intestines, allowing him to flee and rejoin Ashilipa. Following that, the trio eats the horse meat cooked in a delicious recipe, while Ritar eats the intact one. Hijikata makes a visit to Zenjiro Shibukawa, a potential partner, but he decides to kill Hijikata, costing him and his men their lives. With that, Ashiyama suspects that Hijikata's primary goal is to construct a new Shinsengumi rather than gold. The next day, Ashilipa and Sugimoto go deer hunting and come upon the traces of two men. These two men are Tanigaki and Tetsu's Nihei, the latter a famed bear hunter, and they are on a quest for Ritar, the last Hokkaido wolf. Ashilipa suspects Tanigaki is up to something but is unsure of what. Nihei plans to use a deer as bait to lure Ritar out. Ashilipa and Sugimoto keep looking for the deer they were hunting and eventually find it, but Sugimoto can't bring himself to shoot it. As a result, he accidentally shoots in the air, hinting at Tanigaki about them. Soon after, Ritar arrives to kill the deer that Sugimoto has missed, causing Ashilipa and Sugimoto to share a supper. They take the deer's head and leave the rest for Ritar to consume. They arrive at their hut and find Shiraishi, who has brought wine for them. At the dinner, Shiraishi says that Tetsu's Nihei is one of the tattooed prisoners and that he was seeking market rates for a white wolf's pelt. Ashilipa's mind races as she understands Tanigaki is after Ritar, not her. On the other hand, when Nihei and Tanigaki approach the site where the deer has been left dead, Tanigaki recognizes Ashilipa's tracks. Nihei suggests that they take a bath while they wait for the wolf. Tanigaki notices tattoos on his body as he strips himself naked and threatens him with a gun, but Nihei convinces him to stop by telling him a story from his past. They continue to wait, but Ritar does not appear, so they devise another strategy. The next morning, Nihei blends into the trees and attempts to shoot Ritar, but Ashilipa comes and alerts Ritar by blowing an arrow. Nihei gets cornered by Sugimoto, who is instead assaulted by his pet. As Sugimoto and Shiraishi are battling Nihei, Tanigaki takes Ashilipa hostage. At this, the two surrender and are held captive while Tanigaki takes away Ashilipa. On his way, he is wounded by a poisoned arrow after walking into a deer trap, but Ashilipa saves him by chopping off the poisoned flesh. Just thereafter, Nihei appears and captures Ashilipa in order to entice Ritar. As expected, Ritar comes to Ashilipa's aid with such zeal that Nihei is unable to point a gun. Ritar, together with his mate, a gray wolf, assaults and murders Nihei. Soon after, Sugimoto and Shiraishi also arrive, and Tanigaki is taken to Ashilipa's village to heal. In the village, they all have a wonderful supper, and Tanigaki intervenes, explaining that the gold is considerably more than they had expected and that Naparebo had told the prisoners. Tsurumi's desire for gold is to organize a military coup in order to establish an independent Hokkaido, a state in which everyone who lost their families in the Russo-Japanese War may find a permanent job and make a life. Actually, the 7th Division was accused of a regrettable high-ranking officer casualty during the 203 Hill combat. They were refused any money and were treated like outcasts. That's when Tsurumi decided to claim the Ainu gold. Hijikata brings Ashiyama to a brothel since he can't go a day without intimacy. Here, Ashiyama finds Shiraishi and pursues him. Ashiyama would not give up on him, so Shiraishi runs and runs until he is confronted by the guards. It all culminates in a shooting, which diverts authorities' attention away from a bank heist that Hijikata has just executed, as well as the theft of a priceless katana. After this incident, Shiraishi tries to track down Ashiyama but is caught by him. Ashiyama plans to use him as a snitch in Sugimoto's group, and he accepts. Later, the Sugimoto group proceeds to catch a massive shark, but tidal currents cause one of the sailors, Henmi, to tumble into the water. Sugimoto saves him, and it turns out he is one of the tattooed prisoners who is afraid that Sugimoto is after his life. Therefore, he makes every attempt to hide his tattoos before deciding whether to commit suicide or kill Sugimoto. Just then, Ashilipa discovers a dead guy, whom Henmi killed because he had seen his tattoos. But before she can inform Sugimoto, Henmi whisks him away, stating it is a safer place. They soon arrive at Tsurumi's house, where Tsurumi attempts to attack them, but the two flee and reach the shore. Shiraishi alerts Sugimoto that Henmi is the tattooed prisoner. Before Henmi can fight him, Sugimoto stabs him to death in an oddly romantic manner. An orthodoxan steals Henmi's tattooed body. Sugimoto leaps into the ocean and pulls out his body, which has sadistic romanticism as its dying thoughts. In the village, when Ogata and Nikaido arrive at a surface hut, they suspect Hanagaki of murdering the squad sent after Sugimoto. He flatly denies their accusations and denies ever seeing Sugimoto. They leave the hut only to shoot him and a surface grandma from a distance. Hanagaki outperforms them by releasing the smoke screens and realizes they are fighting factions in the 7th that have dubious motives that contradict Tsurumi's. Elsewhere, Sugimoto's group has a pleasant supper at a traditional hotel, where Hijikata comes disguised as a random fella. He picks up a sleepy Ashilipa and wonders aloud whether she is of Russian descent. He inquires about Ashilipa's Japanese name, but Sugimoto is unaware of it. Anyway, Hijikata departs, prompting Shiraishi to make copies of the tattoos. After securing Ashilipa's grandma, Tanigaki runs to the wilderness, armed with Nihei's rifle and 1 cartridge of ammo. Ogata and Nikaido pursue him, but he outperforms them thanks to his hunting and trapping abilities. Just then, Tsurumi arrives with his men and takes Nikaido, but Ogata flees. Tsurumi slices his ear to inform him of the identity of the traitor in the 7th, but he shows no reaction. But when Tsurumi formally orders him to kill Sugimoto, he relents. Meanwhile, Sugimoto's group goes for a stroll, and Shiraishi is captured after falling into the river by a huge Huchin. Fortunately, Kirarank, a friend of Ashilipa's father, saves him. He kills Huchin, and they all feast on it. During supper, Kirarank informs them that an old man in the village was looking for a girl named Asuko Kochu. Aispa is dumbfounded when she hears her Japanese name, which only her parents knew about. Kirarank then spills the beans, saying Ashilipa is Naparebo's daughter. Hearing this, she can't believe it was his father who murdered and robbed Ainu. To get answers, Sugimoto's group travels to Abashiri, where Naparebo is imprisoned. They soon arrive in Sapporo, where they acquire explosives and bombs before heading to the Sapporo World Hotel for the night. Ashiyama also stays at the hotel and intends to have sex with its proprietress, Kano Ayanaga. Sugimoto's group is also greeted by Kano, who turns out to be a tattooed prisoner as well as a cannibal who consumes her guests to stay young and flawless. She intends to devour Ashiyama's massive body and Ashilipa's beautiful eyes. She throws Shiraishi and Ashiyama into her torture chamber and tries to harm Ashilipa, but Sugimoto stops her. He begins interrogating her while she pretends to be a fool. Shiraishi, who has escaped from the chamber, comes just then and tells Sugimoto the truth about Kano. Sugimoto pursues her and is thrown into the basement, where the fire begins. He manages to elude capture and takes Ashilipa with him. On the other hand, Shiraishi's explosives-filled bag is tossed into the basement, culminating in a large fire that buries Ashiyama and Lenaga under debris. However, Sugimoto's group survives and continues on their venture. Hereafter, Shiraishi goes to see Ashiyama, who is still alive and well, and gives him a duplicate of Henmi's tattoos. Then Ashiyama leads him inside Kano's recovery room. Ashiyama has apparently fallen in love with her. Thanks to Shiraishi's recklessness, Sugimoto's group now requires money to purchase new explosives. Furthermore, Kirarank states that Shiraishi has lost all of the money owed to Ashilipa in gambling. It enrages them all. Then they all encounter a clairvoyant named Inkermat, who claims to know all about the past and future, and she suggests the group abandon their pursuit. Ashilipa doesn't believe a word she says while Shiraishi is wooed by her. The next day, Shiraishi brings Inkermat to a horse race, where he bets on 2 horses and wins money. Sugimoto's group arrives and chastises him for his folly. Shiraishi responds by hurling money he has earned at them. Inkermat believes horse number 6 will win the race, whereas Kirarank believes horse number 3 will win based on past experience. Shiraishi, defying Kirarank, places his whole stake on number 6. Soon after, Kirarank discovers that horse number 3's rider has bolted because his Yakuza boss wants him to lose on purpose. Kirarank goes in and grabs number 3, finally winning the game. Shiraishi loses everything and has a mental collapse. In Barato, Ogata meets with Hijikata and offers him a tattooed skin and also wants to become his bodyguard. Later that day, Shiraishi, now sober and sorry, meets with Sugimoto and tells him the story that Kano told him about a robber who broke into a house in Yubari and found taxidermized human mounts and a skin with tattoos that did not appear to be Yakuza's. Sugimoto decides to take the lead and heads with his group to Yubari. And thus ends the first season of anime. Thank you for watching the video. If you hit the subscribe button, it would be amazing, wouldn't it be?